At 9:59 a.m. on September 11th, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in the middle of the biggest rescue operation ever mounted in New York's history. In barely 10 seconds, 110 stories disintegrated into an avalanche of steel and pulverized concrete, which engulfed Lower Manhattan in clouds of smoke and dust. There were no survivors. It would only be a matter of time before the North Tower fell. The firefighters inside realized time was running out.
I knew what kind of danger we were in. The time wasn't on our side anymore, that we were going to be lucky if we got out of here alive. I looked at my guys and I says, all right, guys, if that one can go, this one can go. It's time for us to get out of here.
28 minutes later, the North Tower began to fall. Those who couldn't get out seemed to face certain death. Yet 14 people trapped in one of the stairways lived to tell the tale. They are unique eyewitnesses to the collapse of the Twin Towers from the inside.
You could actually hear the floors hitting one another. Boom, 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 boom. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, oh shit, this is it, we didn't make it.
I rolled to a corner and basically went into a fetal position and just waited for the end.
I thought I was going to be dead in a few seconds. And I remember feeling, I hope, I hope this is fast.
I pretty much saw my funeral, so everybody's at the wake, and my parents and family there.
2,749 people, including 343 firefighters, died in the tragedy of 9/11. Yet amazingly, 14 people who were inside the North Tower when it fell managed to survive. This is their story. The Miracle of Stairway B. As dawn broke on the morning of September 11th, 2001, it seemed just like any other day in New York. Commuters made their way to work at the World Trade Center in Manhattan. Then, at 8:45 a.m., there was news of an extraordinary incident. At his firehouse on East 29th Street, Lieutenant Mickey Cross heard the first reports coming in on the fire department radio.
I'm listening to a transmission from a chief, and he was downtown, and he was at a gas leak or something very routine, and he was calling to the fire department dispatcher that he was confirming that an aircraft had hit the World Trade Center.
The plane hit the North Tower between the 93rd and the 99th floors. Josephine Harris was working on the 73rd floor. She would be one of the 14 people to survive.
The building just began to rock. And I kept saying, why won't it stop? Why won't it stop?
Among the first firefighters to respond to the emergency at the World Trade Center was another of the survivors, Lieutenant Jim McGlynn of Engine 39.
My girlfriend Kathleen works in that area. So before we left, I called and left a message on her voicemail at work that there was a plane that hit the Trade Center, that it was probably terrorism, and to stay away from that area.
Huge fires were engulfing the top of the North Tower. On the 73rd floor, a bewildered Josephine Harris was trying to remember her evacuation drill.
Always take your pocketbook. And I remember that. You got your keys, you got your money. So, I always have the bag, and I'm gonna let go of my pocketbook. And then I start down the stairs. But that's when I'm thinking, what's going on?
Within 15 minutes, 235 firefighters were called out to the disaster area. One of the units to arrive was Ladder 6, led by Captain Jay Jonas. Their rescue of Josephine would play a vital role in their own survival.
It put a knot in your stomach, going across, seeing that. Something that you never thought you'd see. You saw the North Tower of the World Trade Center, the top 20 floors in flames.
When Lieutenant Jim McGlynn and his unit arrived at the scene, the tragedy was all too real. One of the first hazards they faced was the bodies of jumpers crashing to the ground.
I saw people jumping. You heard them hitting the pavement. And you realized the utter desperation that these people must be going through in order to jump to their death.
9:03 a.m. A second plane crashed into the South Tower. A major disaster turned into a catastrophe. Mickey Cross and his unit had just got there. He would be another of the miraculous survivors.
We got showered with debris. We were getting these pieces of material were coming down flaming. I remember seeing that. It looked like, it reminded me like meteorites or meteors or something. We all got off, we got our equipment, and I kind of huddled everybody together. We had it kind of like a little pep rally, pep talk, something. I wanted to say something to the guys. I was nervous, you know, so I think that helped me to come to center myself, you know.
9:10 a.m. More fire units were arriving. A command post had been set up in the lobby of the North Tower, where the fire chiefs directed operations. Jay Jonas was one of those given his assignment by Chief Hayden.
As they came in and we gave them their assignments, you could almost look in their eye and realize that they themselves knew that this was going to be very risky and very difficult for all of them.
I gave them a salute, and I walked over to where my firemen were waiting for me. And I walked over to them and I said, all right, here's the deal. That's a raw deal, but this is what we have.
Chief Jonas came back over, and I'll never forget these words. He just said, boys, they're trying to kill us. Let's go. And, you know, you really don't have a choice. You know, you that's what we get paid to do. You go.
New York's firefighters were facing the biggest and most treacherous high-rise fire in history. Nothing could have prepared men like Jim McGlynn for a disaster on this scale.
Every fire has its challenges. Every fire is a little bit different from the other. But this was totally uncharted water. Knowing that this fire was being fueled by jet fuel, you knew that you were going to have to improvise and deal with it when you got up there.
With the elevator shafts destroyed, just getting up to the 90th floor was a daunting prospect in itself. James Eftimiardis was one of Jim McGlynn's men.
At that moment, I was thinking, God, we have to walk up 90 flights of stairs with all our gear and get up there. I was supposed to go home 6 o'clock that night, and I knew that wasn't happening.
9:25 a.m. The fires in the North Tower are blazing out of control. By this time, Josephine Harris has made it down to the 60th floor. She suffered no injuries from the explosion, but was slowed down by an old injury to her leg.
Around the 60th floor, I looked at the number, and I said, gee, 60. And I stopped. I told myself, don't look at the number of floors anymore. And I didn't, and I kept going.
By now, the fires, fed by jet fuel, were consuming the upper floors of both towers. In the South Tower, the temperature rose to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, causing the steel framework supporting it to buckle. But the firefighters were unaware how close the towers were to collapsing.
It took us about an hour to get to the 31st floor. And we were regrouping there, and at that time, the building shook so violently that you couldn't stand up. Everybody had to hit the floor.
What had caused the building to shake was the catastrophic collapse of the South Tower beside it. But the firefighters inside the North Tower were unsure what had just happened. Many of their radios weren't working, and the huge dust clouds made it almost impossible to see anything outside.
I thought the elevator may have been coming down the shafts. Maybe they cut loose and they were coming down the shafts, and I was right near the open shaft, so I was a little concerned about being sucked into the shaft. I'm thinking if the elevator's coming down, it's going to create a vacuum and I could be pulled. You know, this is what was going through my mind.
In the back of my mind, I thought that a piece of our building had fallen off. So I looked at Billy Burke. I says, all right, Billy, you go check the south windows. I'll go check the north windows. We'll see what we can see. And I couldn't see anything. All I saw was the white dust pressed against the glass. I looked at Billy Burke, and I asked him, is that what I thought it was? Thinking he'd say that part of our building collapsed. And he just looked at me with a straight face. And he said, the South Tower's just collapsed.
It was a disaster on an unimaginable scale. The streets around the World Trade Center had been engulfed with debris and dust, leaving the command structure of the fire department in tatters. Jay Jonas knew it was only a matter of time before the North Tower would also fall. If they couldn't get out, nothing short of a miracle would save them. In the aftermath of the collapse of the South Tower, dazed firefighters were trying to regroup and get to grips with the catastrophe they faced. All they could hear were the calls for help and the high-pitched personal alarms of injured firefighters going off all around them. Inside the stricken North Tower, Captain Jonas knew it was a race against time.
I knew what kind of danger we were in. The time wasn't on our side anymore, that we were going to be lucky if we got out of here alive. So I looked at my guys and I says, all right, guys, if that one can go, this one can go. It's time for us to get out of here.
We weren't running. We weren't even really moving all that fast, you know. We were basically at a very steady pace. We stayed together and we were working our way down.
I thought I was very clear to my men that the other tower had collapsed. But I didn't find out till later that they really didn't understand what I was telling them.
The whole way down, he was like, he just said, come on, guys, let's keep moving, let's go. A couple times we'd stop and we'd look around, you know, maybe take a look on a floor. Come on, guys, let's keep moving.
10:15 a.m. Captain Jonas and his Ladder 6 crew had reached the 15th floor when they ran into Josephine Harris on Stairway B. Even though her office manager was helping her down, her leg was so bad she could only move at a snail's pace.
Every fiber in my being was telling me, keep going. You know, you're wasting time. Get out of this building.
And I turned around and said to Captain Jonas, I said, what do you want to do? And he said, grab her, let's go.
Somebody told the manager that was with me, because he stayed with me, that he could go. They would take care of me. This was Ladder 6. And we start down. I'm getting more and more tired. It's really getting to me now.
I helped her as much as I could, and we moved down, but it was a very slow process. She was, her legs were giving out. She was just all beat up.
I'll be behind Billy Butler. I said, Billy, can you move a little faster? And my speech would be slower and more deliberate. Inside, I'm screaming. We got to get out of this building. We got to move faster. We got to move faster. So we're not going to make it.
It was 10:24 a.m., 25 minutes after the collapse of the South Tower. Captain Jay Jonas and Ladder 6 had helped Josephine down to the 4th floor. Then they ground to a halt.
Once we got to the 4th floor, Josephine Harris couldn't stand up anymore. And she told us to leave her. We weren't going to leave her.
And I'm really, really tired now. And I think I said something to them like, leave me. I want to sit down, because I wanted to sit down. And they could just leave me.
It's that clock ticking that, you know, we don't have any time. You know, every second that passes by is a second closer to us not making it out of here.
While Jay Jonas and his crew were stuck on the 4th floor with Josephine, rumors that the North Tower was about to collapse sent everyone running for their lives. Lieutenant Jim McGlynn had got to the ground floor. Then he discovered a colleague, John Drum, was missing.
I told the guys, I said, all right, you guys stay right here. I'm gonna walk in and see if we can go back and find John. So I walked back into the stairwell and walked up a couple of flights.
But James Eftimiardis and the crew of Engine 39 followed Jim into the stairway.
As soon as I got into the stairwell, you heard creaking of metal, and you just knew that the building was coming down. It was so loud.
That's when the building began to shake again. And you knew exactly what was going on this time. There was no doubt, because you heard the floors landing one on top of the other.
Every time a floor hit another floor, it would not only make a noise, but it would cause tremendous vibration. So we're being bounced up and down off the floor, hearing this collapse coming closer and closer.
Mickey Cross was caught on the second floor.
My helmet started flying off my head. I had forgotten to snap my helmet. So I grabbed my helmet. I guess instinctually, I just pulled myself down into the corner.
The collapse of the North Tower created a massive rush of air.
I was blown down 6 stories down to the first floor, and all I could remember while I was being blown down was, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. There wasn't any time to think about anything.
The 110-story tower disintegrated in just 10 seconds.
It was that fast, yet for me it was kind of slow motion too at the same time. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, oh shit, this is it, we didn't make it.
Faced with what seemed like certain death, the trapped firefighters thought their last thoughts and prepared to die.
In those 10 seconds, I was like, well, I'm 33. What have I done with my life? Worked almost all the time. My wife is gonna, be a widow now. And I pretty much saw myself. Pretty much saw my funeral. I saw everybody at the wake at my funeral, and my parents and family there.
You think about everything, I guess, that you haven't done in your life. And you realize that, is this it? Are you gonna make it out of here? And I was just too young, and I have too much more to do with my life than for this to be it.
I thought I was gonna be dead in a few seconds. And I remember feeling, I hope this is fast. Because I had a fear of being trapped, like say with a broken back or severely injured, and still being conscious and alive.
It was strange, but I was at peace when the collapse actually started. I said, all right, whatever's gonna happen now is gonna happen. And I hope it doesn't hurt too much, but the fear was gone.
The collapse of the North Tower killed over 1,300 people trapped inside the building. From outside, the destruction was devastating. It looked like the end of the world, and it seemed impossible that anybody inside could survive. Yet miraculously, the men of Ladder 6 were still alive, buried under the remnants of Stairway B.
I could hear Mike. I could hear him groaning. I could hear him called out to me. I called out to him. So I knew he was alive.
From the neck up, I seemed okay, but everything else was just like pins and needles. I mean, I was slapping my leg with my arm. I'm watching my arm hit my leg, but I can't feel it.
I had my flashlight on my side, and I looked at my hands and looked at myself to see if I was bleeding or anything anywhere.
When he heard noises around him, Captain Jay Jonas realized he too had somehow survived the disaster.
I wanted to know who was still alive. And I started calling them out by name. My guys, I says, Billy.
All of a sudden I heard this voice. I heard it was Captain Jonas. He goes, Billy, are you there? And he had been right behind me. And I said, yeah, I'm here.
The entire Ladder 6 crew and Josephine Harris had survived inside a dark and dust-filled cavity within the collapsed shell of Stairway B. Nobody really understands how this miracle came about, but experts believe it was because the tower fell with its exterior collapsing outwards at a faster rate than its interior, leaving a protected stump toward the base of the building. It was here that the survivors were trapped. When the tower fell, the man who was to play a vital role in their rescue had just arrived on the scene. He was Lieutenant Glenn Rowan of Ladder 43.
We look back, and here comes this huge cloud. And we ducked in this little alleyway, and the cloud just went flying past us. And I'm thinking, okay, we're in pretty good shape, but I look to the side, and the cloud is coming now from the east side, too, to totally envelop us. It was lights out. It was completely black.
As the dust began to clear, radio traffic suddenly increased dramatically with Mayday calls.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
I got on the radio, and I transmitted my own Mayday message. I says, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Sea Officer of Ladder Company 6, we're trapped in the B stairway of the North Tower.
However, the scale of the disaster made any coordinated response to the Mayday calls virtually impossible.
Got water?
Battered firefighters were emerging from everywhere, looking for water and gasping for air.
Under the fire truck.
Ladder 6 waited for a response to their call for help, but there was no reply.
Initially, we just sat tight. We made Josephine as comfortable as we could, and we just stayed quiet and listened and monitored the radio.
We're sitting there, and I'm wondering, how am I going to get out of here? I'm thinking, I should have called the kids. It's been about 2 weeks. Then it goes back to how they're going to get me out here.
Also trapped further down in Stairway B was Lieutenant Jim McGlynn and his crew.
My concern was the rest of this building is coming down, and we have a limited amount of time to get out of here. So I looked around at the building and was trying to find other ways out.
Lieutenant McGlynn was talking to us, and he's like, guys, can you see my light? So we said, we can hear you, we can see a light, but there is no way out of here. We were in just a tight little teepee concrete vault.
Another survivor was Mickey Cross. Like all the others, he had no idea of the scale of the disaster he'd miraculously lived through.
I had the thought on occasion that, okay, wake up now. I was in a dream, that this was a nightmare. And I said, okay, I want to wake up now. I want to go downstairs and have a cup of coffee with the guys in the firehouse and shoot the breeze. Because this can't be real. This can't be happening.
It was 11:30 a.m., and the survivors had been trapped in total darkness inside the smoking ruins of Stairway B for an hour. It was hot and dusty, and with no radio contact, they had no idea what was going on in the outside world.
We're trying to figure out what exactly has happened to us. We survived some sort of catastrophic event, but we don't know how bad it is. Did the top of the building fall off? Couldn't be the whole building collapsed because we're still there. We're in this stairway. It's twisted and rubble filled, but it's there.
In the debris field above them, the firefighters were just beginning their search and rescue operations. But the chaos and destruction that confronted them made it all painfully slow and extremely dangerous. Some of the survivors were already wondering if they would ever be dug out and rescued.
I had no idea what was over us. I'm thinking 110 stories. How much rubble that is, if they start pulling it apart, how long would it take for them to get to us? So there were times it was very wondering, they'll never get to us. It might take weeks and weeks,
Hundreds more firefighters were now arriving at the disaster area, but Captain Jay Jonas's Mayday messages were still not being picked up. Trapped down in Stairway B, there was nothing else Jay could do.
We realized we can't get ourselves out. And that's a big mental leap for a fireman to take, because we're so used to being the people who are going in to rescue someone. Now, the roles are reversed, and you realize you're helpless yourself.
Josephine also felt helpless, but remained calm and composed. even in her prayers.
I remember one time saying to God, if you get me out of here, I'll never ask for anything again. And I said, nope, I'm not going to say that.
It soon became clear to the outside world, however, that there would be very few survivors. Those who feared their loved ones had been killed when the towers collapsed desperately tried to find out if they were alive. Mickey Cross's girlfriend, Christine, telephoned his firehouse. She was told he was missing.
I started yelling at the firefighter who answered the phone. I was saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? He's just not back from the job yet. And then I came out of my little denial and I said, listen to me, I'm calling this disaster a job. And then I went out to look for him.
Strict security measures made it virtually impossible for family and friends to get anywhere near the World Trade Center site. So Jim McGlynn's girlfriend, Kathleen, went to his firehouse for any news of him.
I just started asking a lot of questions, and I said, well, can you at least tell me when they responded? And at first, they just weren't sure, or they just didn't want to tell me. And then one of the firemen came up to me, and he said, they responded at 8:52. And it was then that I really started to fall apart, because I realized if they left at 8:52, they were down there. And I knew what happened.
Shocked and traumatized, the nearest and dearest of the victims could do nothing but hope. If anyone had survived the collapse of the Twin Towers, the rescuers were determined to find them. But with any survivors buried alive in a debris field that extended over 16 acres, they knew time wasn't on their side. It was midday on 9/11, and Captain Jay Jonas's Mayday messages were still not being picked up. The firefighters had no idea there was a pocket of survivors nearby. Then Jay again tried to make radio contact. Unexpectedly, this time his call was picked up. One of the officers coordinating rescue operations was Chief Nick Visconti. He responded to Jay Jonas's Mayday call.
Operation Ladder 6, all units stand by. Operation Ladder 6.
I got a radio transmission from Nick Visconti. I heard Operations Post to Ladder 6. Operations Post to Ladder 6. This is Jay, where are you?
Okay, 10-4. North Tower, Stairway B is in boy on the second floor.
The location given by Jay Jonas was unbelievable to the firefighters listening. The North Tower no longer existed. They asked for his location again.
He asked me that a couple times, and one time he asked me that. Somebody else got on the radio and said, where's the North Tower?
I remember somebody saying that, where's the North Tower on the radio? And I said, oh shit. I says, it's not good.
Chief Visconti sent out rescue teams to look for Ladder 6. However, first they would have to find the remains of the North Tower. In the meantime, the chief kept in contact with Jay Jonas.
One of the few times I got choked up, he just kept coming over the radio and said, I'm coming for you, brother. I'm coming for you.
We're coming for you, brother. We're coming for you.
News that Ladder 6 had survived the collapse of the North Tower got through to Jay's wife, Judy, but she was told they were still trapped.
It was relief in some ways to hear that he was alive and that he was trapped, but there was many stories of guys being trapped and not coming out. So trapped is not a great word for a fireman's wife, but he was alive.
There was no news at all, however, about most of the missing firefighters. Chief Hayden, who was coordinating search and rescue operations, had the painful job of answering questions from next of kin.
There were many men that I know and work with coming up to me and asking me, you know, Pete, Chief, have you seen my son? And son's coming up, you know, Chief, have you seen my father? And it was a very difficult time to look them in the eye and knowing full well that most likely their son or their father had been killed.
1:30 p.m. The rescue of the firefighters buried in Stairway B still seemed a long way off.
I started to freak internally. I never voiced anything, but inside, I was freaking out, and I wanted to get out of there, you know. And but I started to look around, and everybody else was calm. Josephine was calm, so I started to talk to myself to calm myself down.
I didn't pass out. Afterwards, I thought about it myself. I said, gee. But there was no time for crying.
Glenn Rowan and his Ladder 43 crew were one of the first rescue teams sent out to try and find the Stairway B survivors.
We're walking across this debris field, and it was pretty hazardous area to be. And I'm like, God, dear God, I just said to myself, it was the first time I said, you know, just, you know, keep my guys safe. You know, this is dangerous. This is very dangerous.
Locating them, even with regular radio contact, proved to be almost impossible. Then, down in the depths of Stairway B, things changed dramatically.
All of a sudden, a ray of sunshine hit the stairway. You know, you're looking at it, you're in this darkness, and then all of a sudden, a ray of sunshine hits the floor. I said, where's that coming from?
It was just clearly sunlight. Maybe it was about 12 inches wide, and it was all peppered with this dirt and debris and running through it. But it was the most beautiful sight in the world. It was almost hard to believe, this sunlight coming. I mean, this is a 110-story building fell down right on top of us, and I'm on the 3rd floor looking at sunlight.
The hole letting in the sunlight proved to be the way out of Stairway B. The first trapped firefighter to emerge through the hole set up a rope, and some of the survivors began to climb out. The others were still trapped beneath the wreckage. Glenn Rowan still couldn't see them, but realized he was very close.
He goes, how close are you? And I just said, I'm gonna scream. And I screamed at the top of my lungs, probably to let out some emotion. And he said, oh, okay, I got you. You're right over there.
Somebody goes, there's a fireman. And sure enough, we looked out through this hole, and there was a fireman.
I could just see them starting to come out of the hole. This incredible area, and I can't believe there's people walking out of this spot. It's just so dangerous. And where did they come from? Where were they?
After being buried for over 4 hours, the firefighters were astonished by the scale of the devastation surrounding them.
I looked around and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, all I could see is fire and smoke and twisted debris. And it looked like we had just been hit by a nuclear bomb. You know, I said, wow. I can't believe I survived this.
The first rescued firefighters set off across the treacherous debris field with one of the Ladder 43 crew leading the way. Meanwhile, Glenn Rowan climbed down into Stairway B to look after Josephine and the other survivors who were still trapped inside.
I remember seeing him come down, and he's on a rope. And I'm like, how are they gonna get me out of here on a rope? You look around, the place, it's totally disaster.
I said to Josephine, you're okay, you're gonna be fine. We have more people coming and more equipment. We'll get you out of here safely.
Having put Josephine at ease, Glenn Rowan then turned his attention to Jim McGlynn. Jim was on a landing. Below him, 2 of his crew were trapped inside a narrow void.
I said, okay, great, Glenn. What do you have with you? Do you have a rescue? Do you have a squad? Who's with you? And he says, at the moment, it's just me. And I said, okay, well, we have a problem.
You can just hear the disappointment in his voice. He's like, oh, we're gonna be here so much, you know, how are we gonna get my guys out? We gotta get my guys out.
Glenn Rowan was determined to get them out, but he knew it wasn't going to be easy. At 2:30 p.m., the first group to be rescued from Stairway B began to make their way across the treacherous debris field of the ruins of the World Trade Center.
There was no solid footing there. This was just twisted, bent up beams. Some were cut, there was sharp edges, but there was nothing solid.
All that dust that was created from this collapse made the steel very, very slippery. If you put your foot on it, it was almost like talcum powder.
It wasn't easy. We had to go up and under concrete and twisted steel, and some of it was hot, some of it was smoldering, and it was sharp edges, and there were voids everywhere. And we basically just stayed together. We took our time. We crawled over this debris field.
After an hour of relentless effort, Glenn Rowan and his crew managed to dig out the last 2 remaining firefighters of Ladder 39 from the void where they'd been trapped. All 14 survivors were now free from the building, but they still had to make it to safe ground.
As soon as I got out, I just looked. I'm like, which way do we go? And the guy's like, that way. Finally, I got the guts to go. I started climbing down beams, up beams, down beams, up beams. I took off.
After what seemed like an unending struggle to escape from the danger zone, Mickey Cross finally began to feel the end was in sight.
I saw a bunch of firefighters coming up the pile. And that's the first time I felt okay. I says, okay, these are fresh troops. They're coming from a place of safety, so if I could just get to them, I'll be okay.
Mike Meldrum's back was injured and he was very unstable on his feet. He feared he wouldn't be able to make it through the 16-acre debris field littered with 30-foot-high hills of broken beams and shifting masonry.
I remember saying to myself, you know, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this. You know, I just don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, if you missed a step, if you fell, there was no way to get you back.
Mike looks at me, he says, Cap, I can't do it. I can't climb up. I said, yes, you can climb up. He says, no, I can't. I says, Mike, your wife and kids are on the other side of that hill.
Mike Meldrum did make it to safety, as did all the 14 survivors who were buried in Stairway B. Remarkably, none of the survivors were seriously injured. They were all given first aid as soon as they came out. This is Billy Butler on the gurney being given medical attention. The first thing Mike Meldrum wanted to do was to get back to his fire truck.
I remember looking for the trucks, because all the trucks were there. And I could see the walkway bridges, they were down. I couldn't see any trucks. There were no, I says, my truck should be somewhere right here. And I couldn't see it. All it was just mounds and mounds of debris. And I think that was the first time I really got to look back. And there was nothing in these buildings.
3 p.m. Jay Jonas was looking for a command post to report in. He saw Chief Hayden standing on top of a fire truck coordinating the rescue operation.
Jay came up and he reported, he stood there and I'm looking down at him and he saluted me and he says, Captain Jonas reporting for duty. And I just couldn't help but smile at him because this was one of the bright moments of the day.
It was a very emotional moment for him and I. You know, he looks down, he starts crying. I look up and I'm crying. And he says, Jay, it's good to see you. I says, it's good to be here.
Mickey Cross was wandering around in a daze trying to find his crew members. Then he saw a man behind a desk at an improvised command post.
There was a flat table with some papers on it, and it was the chief sitting there. And I said, that looks like someplace I should go. And I said, I'm Lieutenant Mickey Cross, Engine 16. So he looks at me, he goes, he has this list of names. He goes, oh, geez, we have you missing as presumed dead. You know, he says, no, I'm here. And then I asked him, I says, where's my company? Did they all get out okay?
All of Mickey's crew were out of the North Tower before the collapse occurred and survived. But Mickey's girlfriend, Christine, had no news of his whereabouts and was searching for him at Ground Zero.
The condition of the men that I saw and the women coming out of there, it didn't look promising. And it's, you know, 3 o'clock-ish, and still there was no word about Mickey.
Jim McGlynn was receiving first aid and worrying about the other firefighters in his unit.
I just went over and I got myself checked out, and I had a lot of dust in my eyes and glass, and I guess when they washed them out. Nobody was sure of where people were, of the magnitude of our losses. There were estimates of 100, 200, 300 dead, but nobody was really sure.
All the men in Jim's unit survived, and at last, his girlfriend Kathleen got the news she desperately wanted to hear. Jim was safe.
I felt my whole body just feel relieved. And I just said my prayers of thanks.
James Eftimiades suffered severe breathing problems. He was given emergency treatment, then taken to hospital. Before he went, he managed to speak to his wife.
I called my wife. I said, "It's me. I just want you to know I'm okay. I gotta go. Call my mom. Let her know I'm okay." So she says, "Okay."
10:30 p.m. The burst of optimism that came from finding the survivors of Stairway B was beginning to fade. Exhausted firefighters went home while fresh volunteers arrived to face the grim reality of Ground Zero. After a very long day, survivor Sal D'agastino made it back to his firehouse.
Well, we get back to the firehouse, and we walked into the office, which is right off the apparatus floor, watching it on TV, and that's when we really hit us the magnitude of this whole thing. I went upstairs to take a shower, and I basically was in the shower, and that's when I kind of broke down. I started crying in the shower, and shaking, and just a mess, basically.
After a long and difficult rescue, Josephine was given a medical checkup. Then she went home.
And when I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I had to take some steps back. I was shocked at what I looked like. I get the television on, and I start hearing all this. And I lost it. I just lost it right there in the middle of the floor. Just unbelievable.
For hours, Mickey Cross aimlessly wandered the streets in a state of shock. Later that evening, he returned to his firehouse, where he was reunited with his girlfriend, Christine.
Me and Christine, we walked to my apartment, and I must have fallen asleep. I don't remember the rest of the night. She says I was yelling in my sleep that night. I don't recall.
Mick shook like a leaf and screamed all night long in his sleep. He has no recollection of it. You couldn't go near him. It was like he was going to snap like a tree branch.
As the night wore on, Glenn Rowan and his unit eventually went home exhausted.
I wanted to see everyone. I wanted to hold my wife. I wanted to see my kids. They were all sleeping, of course, but I just wanted to spend some time in their rooms, just being so fortunate that I was able to do this. And so many of our guys aren't going to be able to do it tonight.
The miraculous survival of the 14 people rescued in Stairway B was one of the few moments of hope amidst the tragedy of 9/11. Their story bears witness to the extraordinary courage and heroism of New York's firefighters on the darkest day in their history, when they lost 343 men.
You have to remember these men, not just as firefighters, but taking them as they lived their lives. They were sons, they were brothers, they were husbands, they were fathers, they were friends, they were family men, and then they were firefighters also. They lived lives of responsibility, they lived lives of courage, they lived lives of dignity.